Hello and good morning, good
Hello,
afternoon,
everyone.
good evening. Everybody is joining on this super exciting day to be able to celebrate our friend Gustavo in every different ways in the launch of the new book, Forward Talk. So as always, as people are coming in right now, hello, I'm Chris Littlefield. I'll introduce ourselves in a little bit, but I'm going to be helping Gustavo host this event today. And so as you're coming in, please say hello in the chat where you're connecting from and one word that you would use to describe Gustavo and his work's impact on you. Go ahead and put that into the chat. I'm pulling up the chat right now so I can see it. From Boise, Idaho, Coach Clarity. I love it, Michelle. So where are you coming in from and where? Hi, Gustavo. Lori from Vancouver Island. Work is profound and practical.
Yeah, thank you.
Barcelona, inspiring. So for the folks who are coming in and joining right now in the chat, where are you connecting from and what is a word or a couple words you would use to describe Gustavo and his impact and his work's impact on you? Traveling from Zurich, unique. Virtually, good afternoon from Bonby in the UK, navigating the digital workplace. Absolutely. I love it. Transforming, Marcella. Wonderful to hear. New York City, thought-provoking. Hello from Toronto, courageous. Ewa, great to see you. I was talking with her yesterday. Stockholm, Sweden, facilitator, ignite my work with better conversations. And Gustavo, I'm guessing that you're seeing some names that look familiar in the chat here and the different ways that you've worked with them over the years. Hey,
Many for sure. Yeah, a lot of people I can call my friends, and some people that I recently met, and some that I'm just meeting today. So very excited to have more people joining.
excited to have people here and joining us. From Wisconsin, roundabout, the Whisperer. I love it. And I think for myself personally, I can remember, I think it was maybe about 8 months ago. I was burnout. I was fried. I was going to work with a client that I worked with multiple times. I just did not know what to do. And I was stuck in which conversation should I have? And in like a panic, I sent a note out to Gustavo and he was like, do you need a call? I hopped on the phone and immediately got the concern, what was going on, and gave me the perfect tool and conversation to have, which opened up doors and dialogues for a group that I was stuck with and had been stuck, to be able to move their conversation forward and open up perspectives that I'd never seen open up with that team before. Other folks coming in, hello from the Netherlands. And for the folks who are still joining and coming in, as we're up at 38 people right now, the question they're asking is, where are you connecting from today? And what word would you use to describe Gustavo's work and its impact on you? And look up in the chat for the folks who've been here for a while and read some of the amazing things about the impact. From India, from Ireland, Alice from Italy, from Peru, pragmatic, evidence-based. And if you have a tool, and we'll just give it one more minute here, or one concept or tool from the past that Gustavo shared that is really present in your mind that you've used over and over again, share that in the chat as well for the folks who've already been here. San Diego and Switzerland, Gustavo's work is inspirational and creates instant connections, what we're seeing in the corporate space as a team coach. Netherlands, lighting my fire and inspiration. It's like Jim Morrison there. Come on, baby, light my fire.
Yeah, baby.
The rock star of cultural change. Chicago, inspiring and provoking. Wonderful, folks. Thank you. Oh, the stinky fish is a favorite. The work helps bring clarity quickly. From the car too, we'll listen up. Mine too, Karen. And I think that as we come in here today, to transition into what we're here for is some of those moments of inspiration, of clarity that you've seen, some of those tools and the ability of Gustavo to take the really, really complicated and make it simple and make it something that we can act on, something that we can use is what we're here for today. Because we've all benefited from the brilliance of Gustavo and the impact his tools and his conversations and his trainings and his work has had on us and our clients and our families and our friends and everybody we work with. And today we're here to be able to have a conversation about that latest piece of brilliance that's coming out into the world. So Gustavo, thank you for bringing us all together today. Thank you for doing this, and just want to give you an opportunity to kind of say hello and welcome people here today.
Totally. Thank you, Chris. I'm humbled by all the nice words. Maybe we need to tell people that you have not been paid to say such thing for all the great compliments. So I'm excited to be here. It's been a long journey. Today, when I was writing at 2 or 3 a.m., my LinkedIn post to say, because I couldn't go to sleep, of course, to say, hey, the book is finally out. I was thinking that why did I write the book? And I think it was because I had that debt. I was exploring other topics, other books. And when I say that I had three book ideas, it wasn't just an idea in my head. It wasn't a ChatGPT conversation. Basically, I had three outlines with a description, like at least one chapter each book. So, and I had to kill them to basically focus on this because this was a book that was waiting for me to actually write it. So I'm excited to be here. I'm going to be sharing some thoughts. I'm going to be chatting with Chris. Chris is going to be sharing some questions from the beta readers, and hopefully you have time for everyone to ask some questions as well. This is not going to be a workshop. You know, I like to talk and share stuff, but I'm going to give you some, let's say, a bit of a teaser of what the book is all about and why we're here celebrating, because we need to always celebrate. So let me get started very briefly. As I mentioned, one of the key things that basically drove me is seeing teams stack, and I was part of a team in many moments in my career, but also I was the leader, the team leader, the CEO over and over, that without noticing also was contributing to getting teams stuck. So I always said that everything I'm sharing about, it's not about the work I do with clients today, but also about what I learned from the good and also many bad leaders that I have, but also from my own mistakes as a leader, right? So the book is basically simple in the sense we need to break silence. We need to eliminate the idea of conversational debt that keeps compounding, and in the end, how to make teams move in the right direction, right? And the most, for me, simple yet revealing, and some people felt a little bit, especially some of the beta readers say, hey, I'm not cool with this because it challenged a little bit of the idea that fear is always why people avoid different conversations. When I ask people in my survey, over 5,000 people, why do people basically avoid conversations when it was about others? The majority said it's about the fear. No, people are afraid, they don't want to get into it, and that's about it. Now, when it came to themselves, that level fear dropped a lot. So basically, the conversation wasn't happening because of something else. And this is for me the most pretty telling stuff, that when it comes to ourselves, most people recognize that actually it wasn't fear, but basically this idea of what's the point, no? What I call the pointlessness paradox, in which people basically stop kind of speaking up, no? And this is interesting because, of course, having a great culture helps, but even in great culture, sometimes people stop sharing the ideas, they stop asking the right questions, they stop challenging each other because they realize, hey, what's the point? And this is a process. It doesn't start from scratch. Sometimes you get used to, you observe, and then when there's no action, when your leader asks you to complete this survey, employee engagement survey over and over, and you keep sharing your ideas and nothing happens, then what's the point of sharing my ideas? You stay silent, you basically go with the flow. So we like to invite the audience here, like we know that people tend to regret more not the conversations they had, even if they went really south and bad, but people in my research shows that they regret those conversations that they wish they had but never did. So share with us, and it could be on a personal level, work, or anywhere in between. What's one conversation that, for whatever reason, we're not judging here, you know me, you avoided, and now you regret not having it? Maybe with a friend, maybe with your spouse, maybe with your boss, a person that reported to you, a colleague, whatever. So please use the chat. I know, Chris, you want to pick a couple. If we see something
Yeah,
interesting there, of
wonderful. So,
course.
so put those into the chat. And as you are, one that comes up for me, Gustavo, when you ask that question, is that moment when you're working with a client and you realize that you're avoiding calling out the dynamic on their team because maybe you've brought it up before in the past and then you don't want to say it. You don't want to accept them because you're working with them. And we hold back that feedback or that conversation that we know we need to have. And then we just avoid having it because I don't know, nothing's going to change. Last time I gave them the feedback, they didn't do it. I don't want to upset the person. I don't want to, you know what, they're never going to change. So why do I even keep on doing that?
Mhm.
You know, Miriam
And
just,
we have one brave. Yeah, there on this.
there
Oh,
we
one
go.
more.
And then we have Miriam right here, the conversation with an associate that I had to let go during a stressful time. A recent reached out to tell him what a detrimental effect his management style had on me and the whole team I was leading. Naming to the CEO I was coaching in a team setting that I would no longer play along as a coach and mimic the team's behavior that I learned the hard way, to speaking my truth and saying with integrity. What do you see there? What do you hear, Gustavo?
I hear that in retrospect, one theme, and this is recurring, and especially when I work with teams, people are afraid of the consequences of doing something, but then the regret of avoiding that conversation never goes away, right? And I think that one of the key reasons that we don't do that is because we have a conversation with ourselves. We anticipate and we focus mostly on what could go wrong. And when we do that, of course, it's like an accident waiting to happen, like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Instead of trying to say, well, what if it goes well? What could happen? And you know, Chris, there's a lot of research that shows that after people go through those difficult conversations, they realize that first, usually they went much better than they thought. Second, they feel relief because no, you pay that debt, you're not carrying that burden. And lastly, and most important, the relationship with those people gets stronger and stronger. So trust explodes because of that.
And Gustavo,
So
something that in hearing you say that, that cost, how many people here by raising your hands or just putting an amen in the chat have had a conversation that you've been avoiding with a family member, with a client, with a customer? Give me an amen or a yes into the chat if there's a conversation that you've been carrying. And if there's a conversation that you've been carrying for over a year, give me two Y's into the chat. And we know the cost of this, and that distinction that you say about conversational debt. Okay, the double Y or triple Y. We can do a
that's
Y
me.
for each
That's me
each
too.
for each year you've avoided this conversation, add a Y, right? But if you think about it, how long we carry that. And so introduce us to the concept of conversational debt, Gustavo.
Yeah, it's like I like to make a simple comparison, like any debt. If you think financial debt, that if you basically don't take care of it, it's gonna go out of hand. And the more we keep avoiding those difficult conversations, the worse. I like to use this analogy, like if you have your credit card statement and you spend more money than you could, or maybe you deserve it, I don't care. But if you don't open the envelope, right, or if you don't open the email with your statement, you still have to pay for it, right? And I think this is the paradox that people don't want to face the consequences, don't want to face that conversation they're not having. And they think, and this happens a lot with teams, people believe that issues are going to magically disappear.
Yeah.
But my friends, they won't. And you know that, right? And I always keep telling people, and they look at me like, oh my God. But it's really, silence is not cheap. No, we avoid the consequences of a potentially difficult conversation, but the consequence of silence never goes away. And actually, it's really expensive.
And Gustavo, I don't think it's just expensive, but similar to when we don't pay our credit card debt, we end up paying more and more over the years, 10 years, 30 years, conversations that we've avoided. And they've cost us not only our joy and our happiness, but our freedom and our well-being. So folks, as you see this up here, is that we are here. And so make sure that while you're on here today, is that person in your life that you know has been avoiding a conversation, or the fact that you've been avoiding a conversation, is get a copy of the book here. We're here to celebrate and learn. And all I got to tell you right now is I already got myself to have a conversation with my wife that I have been avoiding for the last 3 years last week as a result of this book. So if there's conversation you're avoiding, make sure you get a copy for your friend here. That's what we're here to celebrate, to no longer be willing to have that debt, to start paying it off, not only at work and in our personal lives as well. So scan the QR code, make sure you get a copy today. And by the way, Gustavo said this, but I am here because I am a fan, not because he's paying me to be here and to support him. And for the folks, I already see some familiar faces here, is because there's nobody who gives more to the world in a contribution and gives us things for free that make it easier. And so our opportunity to be able to give that back and get something that is so ridiculously valuable to ourselves and to our communities. So make sure you're getting a copy today. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for the raised hands right there with that. Yeah, exactly. The woot woot. And thank you for the folks for joining on camera. Wonderful to see you. Now, Gustavo, with that, for all of us who have followed you on LinkedIn or there, I can remember the Post-it notes up on the window in the North Carolina cabin. So tell us a little bit about the journey. You started today, and there was a post you put on today that when you originally started this, was multiple other books. You were thinking about other things. Tell us about the journey that led you to write this book in the first place, and why this book right now?
Sure. And I think it's interesting to basically, most people know me, but when I said that I was writing 3 books, it wasn't that I have a post-it with 3 books ideas, right? Each of those books had an outline, a description, the chapters. So it was hours and hours of work. And I had 3 potential books that I could pitch to any publisher. So when I say that I killed them, I killed months of work, right? And I think it's a paradox in the sense, and I didn't realize that until I wrote that post on LinkedIn earlier this morning, in which I was looking for the book because I didn't want to face the book that I had to write. I was avoiding my own conversation. So that's the king or queen of all paradoxes, in which I was avoiding that issue. I was trying to look into, oh, I would like, this book is going to be cool, but what's the book I need to write? And why? Because I also felt that debt. And I'm not saying this just to self-deprecate myself and look, oh, poor this guy, how he learned and say, boom. But I screw up many times when I used to be a leader, but I also screw up many times as a husband or friend or father. And I could keep naming all the roles he can want to play. And I think that's important also. I usually like to talk about things that I always tell my clients, I'm never going to ask you to do something I haven't tried before with myself at least 3 or 5 times, right?
Yeah.
And so many of the things that are here are the battles that I struggle with myself, the things that I did. So I like to experiment, but I also like to run my experiments, so test them until like and say, okay, I'm obsessive about, okay, yeah, this is gonna work because I survive it.
And how
I
did
don't,
you?
I didn't answer your question, but like I'm
No,
ranting.
you did, but it's saying, okay, this is not the book that I want right now, but it's the book that I feel like I need to write. And as you went through that process, because I feel like there's very few people who are more plugged into what people are experiencing right now, because you are working with different clients, different companies, different leaders who are coming back and saying, these are the issues that I'm seeing. And in a time where people are spending more time pointing the finger and blaming people, avoiding conversations, what is it as you were reading this in parallel to what you saw was going on in the world? Had you slowly shrink the gap between those two things to come out with the ideas that you shared in this book?
I think is sometimes we try to over-engineer the problems, so we ended up with overcomplicated solutions, right? And I think that when people say the idea of baby steps, no, it's basically something we need to get back. If you've been screwing up yourself, the people around you, your team, your boss, whatever, the only way to unscrew yourself from that is the same way, right? And people usually are looking for solutions that are magically fix everything. I say that's not the point. No? So one of the things I discuss in my book, I'm not a financial expert, and I had to go into people that are experts on that and say, how do you deal with debt? So I started exploring the different ways that people can deal with debt. So you can start paying one little thing, you can control costs. So that's the same approach. There's no one size fits all kind of approach. But I think that if we build a pattern that's got us stuck, we need to do it the same way. So one little step backward towards recovery.
And one thing that stands out to me inside of this is the fact that you took this concept of debt that we associate, and there are podcast after podcast of trying to get yourself out of debt and to deal with it and the financial thing, and people trying to get you into debt and all that complicated thing, and then applying it back as a framework for people to understand something that's painful in our personal lives, in the financial reality, into
Mhm.
something that we experience every single day. And what were some of the things that you saw when you were putting up the post-it notes on the cabin in North Carolina and pulling these ideas together? And as you explored debt, what did you start to see as some of those things that helped people start moving out of that conversation of being stuck and moving them back into action?
Yeah, the first thing I saw when I was putting those post-its was the woods, and I say I better go for a walk because I love walking instead of writing the book, right? So it was full of distractions. But I think that that's a great analogy because we need to get lost to recover, to regain sense of who we are and where we want to go, right? And I think that when we lose clarity, when a team is lost, when the team doesn't know what to do, when the team is frustrated, we try to find the answer. And I like people to say, maybe we need to find what's the right question for now and sit on it. What's the pain? What's causing the pain? Know what's going to get the pain away, and don't look for that magic aspirin that's going to cure you, right? But sit with that because in the end, most of the things that we see are symptoms. And we are good at fixing symptoms, quick symptoms, but then things are going to continue to grow, right? Like bugs on your backyard. You need to see what's causing. Is it too much water, too much sun, too much shade, or a combination of everything, right? And that's what I want people to start sitting on it. Don't run away from the issue.
How many people here in what Gustavo just said uh, can think of an example of a team addressing the symptoms, rushing to an answer? Michelle, I just saw it on your face. Or ourselves trying to find a solution for a problem, but never getting down and skipping over the real conversations that will get to the heart of the issue that's there. If you can relate to that, or you've seen that with a client or with someone that you've worked with, give me a why into the chat right now. Yes, exactly. Yes, 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 yes. How many whys can I use? As many as you want, right? Probably in the last weeks alone, where we try to find that quick answer, where we avoid having the conversation because it's easier to try to put a band-aid on something instead of addressing it. And Gustavo, one thing I'd be curious here, and I asked this to you when I interviewed the other day, is you created that culture canvas. as the backbone of what needs to be there. And so many of us here, and give me a thumbs up or a cheer here if you've used the culture canvas at some point in time, either to get clarity on what you were doing or to help a company. Give me a thumbs up. Or exactly. Everyone here has used this at one point in time. I don't know if you can see those all coming up. How do you
Mhm.
see the work that you created in Forward Talk fitting with the work that you've done before with the culture canvas and fearless culture?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind before answering that is to provide a bit of context. Some people like structure things and then everything makes sense. I'm more that I create chaos and then I find or make sense out of that chaos. So when I create the canvas, the first iteration, it was just to be like a collage of boxes. I think, oh, this is culture needs to be here, or maybe remove, and then I have something. And one day I was thinking, and basically through the lens of perspective, and realized, oh, there are actually three sections in the canvas. I didn't envision that. Probably my unconscious mind did, but I didn't intentionally thought about it. And then I realized, oh, there are three groups of areas. The first, second, no. So this is the long-term vision of culture. This is the more emotional side of culture. This is collaboration. And as I progress the work, I say these are going I'm going to start calling the ABCs of culture: alignment, right? The long-term direction, the foundation of culture, belonging. That's the emotional glue that binds us together, and then collaboration, how we work together. So why I'm saying this, because in Forward Talk, when I talk about, sorry, when I talk about, sorry guys,
You're
I
all
want to
good.
be here in spite of being sick. But I wanted to basically, when I talk about conversational debt, I also connect debt with alignment, belonging, and collaboration debt. So these are not conversations about let's talk and get along together. These are conversations that are going to help drive true alignment, not just the illusion of alignment. These are conversations that are going to bring the team together through friction, not just to, oh, we like each other. These are conversations that are going to help people improve their way they collaborate. So it's kind of that's why I say that this is the book that I had to write, because I double click on my previous work.
Amazing. And for myself, when you were just sharing that, the thought that constantly came up for me is having been trained in how to do the cultural campus and to be able to lead that discussion with companies, I realized that we can define all those things and put them up there. But in order to have those conversations, we need to address the things that are there already so we don't just get false alignment or artificial alignment. I just blanked on the term, Gustavo, that you use in the book. But it's like we think that things are great and they're not. And we can't even have those conversations without being able
Mhm.
to break through and clear up that conversational debt that we have that gets created. Amazing. Anything else about the writing process that you want to share that helped you get to the clarity and the models that you have that you put into this book?
I think the most important thing, I mean, I was talking to Miriam here present when she's writing a book, and other people that reach out and say, "Hey, I'm writing a book," and when people ask, first I say I cannot give you advice on how to write a book because I'm not a writer. I consider myself an author. I happen to write, but there are people that have the craft and they write for a living. For me, it's more like another of the things I like to do. And what I learned in order to be see, because we all struggle when we're finding what's the right thing that we want to capture, what's the story that I want to share with the world, what are the tools that we want, how we're going to help others. I always tell people, write the book for yourself. Not for being selfish, but when you try to write a book for each person, no one's going to be happy. I'm looking at Eva and other people here present. When I send them the first man, it wasn't the first, but a manuscript, whatever version it was, they basically almost laughed at me. Eva was, no, this sucks. Don't publish it. She was saying, look at her. She didn't say it like that, but I could see that emotion saying, man, this is not ready, right? So, but in the end, I had to reconcile that feedback, that kind of stuff with what I wanted to tell. Because one of the things that happened with conversations and also connecting my writing, my dilemma or that journey
Mm,
with the intention of the book is that sometimes we fail at conversations because we want to accommodate to the other person. We want to be accepted. We want to be look nice. We say, "Oh, this is not going to harm." I have many leaders say, "Hey, I have a very sensitive conversation with one of my team members because of a performance issue. I don't know how to get started." I always tell them the other person knows. They're waiting for you to start the conversation. They know that there's an issue, either because they know that their performance is not good or they can see your fucking face there. So go and have it. No? So we're waiting for that stuff. Like the other person is clueless. No, the other person or the other person, the team, they are
Yeah.
waiting for that to happen. No? So I think that was a little bit of my own kind of stuff when I was second guessing my thoughts and I say, "Yeah, just do it." And it doesn't need to be perfect. It would never be, but done is better than perfect, right?
And so now that it's in, do you want to, Gustavo, jump in and start sharing some of the forward talk frameworks that you share in this book to give folks who haven't got a copy yet, and because it's just available today, to start sharing some of the insights that you share in this book in the model so people have the reference of it for
Yeah, I
themselves
promise this
and
is
for
not
the
going to be
person.
a workshop, Chris. You know, I like that to get into that mode, but at least I'm going to give people some kind of indication of what the book is all about. I've been keeping it a little bit under the wraps. With other books, I share a lot. With this book in particular, I haven't shared much about the content eh, for many reasons. Some people read the book, some people bought it, but they're clueless. So one of the key things about I like the two by twos because it helps organize people's kind of mind. It's about what are the not only the solution, but first we need to understand what are the patterns that are getting teams stuck when it comes to the conversations and how can we break through. So we have avoidance, blame, and groupthink. And there are two elements. It's are we focusing into the future or into the past? And this is not a marketing, oh, let's move forward kind of stuff. But when it comes to avoidance, it's something happened. We saw like a colleague getting whatever. We said something, and Lori Hill is here say, huh, she gave us that look, and then no one else wanted to say anything, right? So for whatever thing that happened in the past, we keep avoiding conversations. Similarly, blame. Many leaders are so much focused into this idea of performance, into this idea of accountability, which is good, that they only focus into we need to find something to fix. And when you're also when in this fixing mode, the first temptation is to find a culprit, whether it's a team member, a team, or another department that we look to who screwed up. So we get stuck in the past. We talk about the issue, but we're not finding resolution because we're not addressing the foundation, the root cause. We're just getting stuck into, hey, who we blame. Groupthink, and this is the most deceiving, and I've been getting a lot of interviews about this because people say, oh, uh, it's basically the teams that are too nice. No, that's why I also challenge the idea that feeling safe in a team is not enough. There are many teams in which we feel safe, they're really cool, we love each other, but then we don't talk to each other, we don't have those conversations. We avoid the issues because we don't want to be the challenger, we don't want to be called the you're not a team player because of what we say, right? So that's very important. So these three patterns, as you can see, groupthink moves into the future because, hey, let's move on. We agree quickly, we find resolution, but it's not real alignment, it's just agreement. So forward talk is basically combining conversations that, of course, they focus into resolution, they focus into the writing commitment, they focus into action, but addressing the real issue. So if we don't fix this, we don't do that. So it's a mix of curiosity to explore, right? But it's also accountability to solve and move forward. If you only focus on accountability, you have blame. If you only focus on agreement and move forward, you have groupthink. So this is about finding the balance, right?
So oh, I didn't mean to replace the pin here, Gustavo. I hit the wrong button there. 1 second here. And then there you are. And so, one, folks, right there, opportunity, get access to this book right here. Make sure you get a copy of it on there. And with that, Also, something that's extremely important for any of the folks here who have written or published a book at any point in time. Nobody wanted to ask for the reviews, but those reviews are the things that people look at who don't all of a sudden know Gustavo already and the value of the work. It's when they're reading those reviews and those honest reviews from people who get it and see the value that make the difference, that create the momentum that has this book shared with others so they can benefit from as well. So today, if you go on or when you go on and get your copy, or if you've received a copy already, then make sure that you go in and not just, oh, I'll get to it later, but put it in your calendar, write it out right now, but get that review. And I would actually challenge you right now, if you got a post-it note, if you got a little note section on your computer, think about what you would say. I just posted my review right before we got on today. And so just open up a note section and write a little note right there about what your review, similar to Amy Gallo's, thrive on productive conflict rather than polite avoidance. I wrote my review today that said practical and useful. I already had a breakthrough with my wife, a client, and a customer already from reading this book. So if you've got one, draft it out right now, open up Amazon, post it in there, because those reviews in the first day of the launch are critical to the success and momentum and the gift that gets this gift out into the world.
Beautiful. Thank you, Chris. So, shall we hear from the beta readers? They had questions. I think you have the questions.
I do.
I have the questions, but I haven't read them more.
Okay, wonderful. So some questions from the beta reviewers, and if other people have questions as well. So Hyla had a question for Gustavo that says, a lot of teams, and by the way, these are some of the folks that had an opportunity to get early copies of the book to be able to review it. And Hyla, if I'm saying your name wrong, please, my apologies in advance. A lot of teams, Gustavo, think that they're having a healthy debate, but it's actually well-disguised groupthink. What's the clearest signal that tells you the difference? And once you spot that it's actually groupthink, what's the first thing you'd say or do in the moment to shift the conversation?
Yeah. When people are too nice, so don't, I think my wife is on the call, so she's going to say, what do you mean by that? The thing is that when niceness basically takes over the conversation, right? So are we having the real conversation, or we're just trying to look to each other? So when people are looking for consensus, when people are looking for the safest idea that everyone immediately wants to push, that's a sign of that kind of a approach. When there's a lot of silence, not in the sense of people reflecting, but people not expressing their ideas, when people are not asking questions, right? When we agree to something, and not questions only, of course, challenging the thinking, which I love, to proving, hey, is this the right direction? But also questions about understanding. No, people say, oh, let's do that. And I always say, what does that mean? I don't know what he said, right? So people are like moving into action without really realizing what they are committing to. So those are stuff. Francesca here is posting about the body language, and of course, is the when people are agreeing, like, yeah, sure, but they're not really committed. You can feel, does the team have energy? Are they really committing, or are they just saying, okay, whatever you want, boss, let's do it? Yeah. If Chris says so, we're gonna do it, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of a little bit of the science. The other thing is, what can I do, or what's going to the second part of Hyla's question? I think it's important to, for example, what perspective are we missing? Why would our competition laugh at us if they see that we're making this decision, right? So questions that invite us to kind of see the other side. I like to have people playing the devil's advocate role, not one person, but that's a role that people should rotate, because we don't want it to be associated to, hey, Gustavo is the devil's advocate. No, we want to have different people that could always challenge and find that stuff. And what are we missing? What perspective is not working? Why could this idea fail? Or I'd like to say, how are we going to sink the ship, right? When we ask how are we going to sink the ship, then, well, what's the iceberg or the storm that we're missing?
Gustavo, I just had the vision of actually getting some devil's like horns that you put on someone's head in a meeting to have them ask that question to bring the play and the lightness to it. But yeah, that person who's going to challenge and ask people to think and look at something a different way to be able to playfully pull people outside of that. Hyla, thank you so much for the question. Okay, next one. Iwa, Iwa, I'm going to say your name wrong. I think I got it wrong here. Gustavo, you can correct me here. During the writing process, what piece of feedback turned out to be a real wake-up call for you? And I love that this question comes from her when you just gave the example of her giving you that tough feedback in the process. So during the writing process, what piece of feedback turned out to be a real wake-up call for you? Something that exposed a blind spot or challenged a belief you were holding. And how did that moment change the direction of the book?
Yeah, two things. Eva mentioned something about a section in which I was sharing research very high level, and basically her point was either go deep into it or just move on. And that was a little bit of a, in that particular case, I kept it as I originally planned, but I made some other changes based on Eva. There's also Andy that I saw him in the corner, I was still here,
Yeah.
that he challenged a lot of the voice basically in a very nice way. He was saying that at some point I was being either too academic or too arrogant or too pretentious or whatever. I know the language, but basically I got the point that I need to simplify my language and speak from the inside out and not from here, right? So that was a really interesting kind of take because in the end, I don't have the truth. There's no truth. We're all in the quest for finding the right questions.
I
And
love
that's
that.
my mission.
And Gustav, it's perfect that you mentioned Andy, and I don't know if it's the same Andy, but the next question on this list
Yes,
is
yes.
actually from Andy. So Andy asked, what is the relationship between forward talk principle vis-a-vis psychological safety principles exposed by Amy Edmondson?
Yeah, and I can see Andy's here. So he's a great guy, and he reviewed my previous book, Remote Not Distant, as well. So thank you for being patient and for the second time. And he has reviewed many books. He's really thorough, finding source and whatever. Um, this is a question that we can go into 20,000 directions, and we need a call just to talk about it. What I can tell you is just to give some hints because I address this a lot. First of all, that we are now into trying to create the perfect conditions. So if the culture is not perfect, then people shouldn't speak up. And I've been invited to, for lack of a better term, cure or fix many teams that have gotten into the, oh, this team is not safe enough. No matter how many courses and training and coaching they got, they keep saying, hey, so it becomes kind of a little bit of a weaponized tool. I'm not saying about the principles of psychological safety, but you know what happens, like every tool that we all create, especially mine, they evolve. And then in the end, what happens, like in everything, communication is not what we say, but how people interpret it. There's another piece to connect. I think that safety plays a very important thing, but then there's personality that also plays a key role into who people speak up. So we have a group of people in my research that regardless of how safe, whether it's a safe or unsafe the culture, they still participate. There are people that are more basically affected by the context, the environment, the culture, that safety makes them speak up more, less, or even or not even. And there are people that regardless of the culture, they don't contribute because they don't care, because they don't want to, or whatever the reason. So I think that's another layer that we need to think about it. But for
Gustav,
me, my book is more about building what I call conversational agency. People need to regain their voices. We live in a world that AI, social media, psychology, we have basically given up our voices and we're afraid of expressing who we are, what we think. And I'm not saying this about being challenged. We need to be respectful, but sometimes we're so much. Someone was asking a question about groupthink, and groupthink, yes, to your point, it's not just about nicey, it's about basically a surrender, right? Groupthink is when we want to accommodate to others. And when we do that, basically we suffer and the team suffers because your team can basically can rise to the level of those conversations.
Gustavo, when you were just saying about that link between psychological safety, I literally, I don't know, 3 months ago gave a keynote on psychological safety from theory to practice. And a client who I had given the presentation with before came up afterwards and was like, yeah, we all really get the concept, but no one's talking still. They're still not having the conversations. We're putting on the label of it. And that idea and what's included in this book, what I saw is they were specifically asking afterwards, okay, now that we understand the idea of it, we're still avoiding the conversations, but we're pretending to create psychological safety, groupthink. We're avoiding the conversations. People are still blaming people behind. And what you're talking about is the thing that unlocks it and gives them the agency to do the real work, to have the real conversations that will move them forward. And that's what I got present to and what you're saying. Andy, thank you for that question. Okay, so Pete asks, early on in the book, you used a personal example of when you felt compelled to speak up. I actually questioned its authenticity because it felt like something all of us would love to do, speaking up, especially to a superior, or in this case, a client, comes with a huge amount of jeopardy. What's the internal barometer of we should all be conscious? What is the internal barometer we should all be conscious of? And what is the line between bravery and self-sabotage? Brilliant question, Pete.
Yeah. First, Pete was supposed to be hosting the event. I had a personal issue, and Chris took over last minute. So thank you both for that. And Pete is a creative director. I worked my first 20 something years of my career in marketing and advertising in different agencies. And he was questioning a story because it looked like I was the brave guy who stood up against injustice. And it was a true story. And so he asked me, like, give the reader some cues to show that it was real, not that you're making it up. And I was just recently promoted. So I think at that point in my career, I was 23. I'm promoted to VP and running a department and having to stand up in front of a client that almost got me fired by my boss and my client. But then, well, we recover. I think that was a little bit, maybe I wouldn't call it self-sabotage, but I think it was a little bit of unconscious. And we all need to have a little bit of that. I became a little bit more, I don't know, a balance in some aspect, but I still take those risks. For me, the measure, it's personal. So I'm not going to tell you what's the standard. I'm not going to tell you if you don't do, you're a coward. If you do, you're brave. Everyone has to have their own limits and context. But I always like to tell people, if you're not willing to get fired or slapped or whatever because of an idea that you truly believed in, maybe the idea that's it's not worth it, it's not that good as you think, or maybe the idea doesn't deserve you as the owner because you're not willing to fight for it.
Mic drop. Maybe you don't deserve to be the owner of that idea. Gustavo, one, I just want to pause for a second as a reminder for the folks who haven't got a copy. We're here on the launch of Forward Talk. And I know people are asking where you can get it in different locations. Someone shared that if it's in the UK, it may be released a couple weeks later. But here's an opportunity right now to be able to get your copy, to take that review, if you've got the review, and post it up while we're listening to this conversation to help get this launch. And what I'd also love you to do right now is that as you've been listening to this conversation, I want you to think of a person in your life that you know, or a client or a customer, that giving them a copy of this book would be an act of kindness. Right? It'd be an act of kindness because you've been telling them to break through the conversation. You've been telling them they've been stuck. You've been slightly reminding them that they may want to do this. And by giving them a copy of this book, maybe that reminder or that key to unlock that conversation and help them start paying off some of that debt. So think of that person and write a name, just the first name, not a last name, of one person that you can think of that you know would benefit them greatly to have a copy of this book. And just write down a name. My current boss. I love it. I love it. Exactly. And
I'll sign it for you.
And sign it. Exactly. You can send them a copy. I'll never forget a group that told me that they put a whole book on employee engagement on their boss's desk right when they quit. I'm not saying you should quit your job, but they did that as a gift and as a reminder. I need the most myself. I've ordered it. My associates in their practice, the entire executive team. Exactly. Wonderful. Absolutely love it. Gustavo, anything you want to share here, or I want to ask you as we get into the last kind of 10 minutes of this book launch, is there things you want to say, or do you want to open up to questions that people have here? I want to ask you what you think would be most helpful right now.
For me, it's helpful what helps people, and people have questions, some already in the chat. So I think it's like maybe take it from there.
Okay.
Before we wrap up and we jump into the questions, I would like to thank everyone for the nice shout outs and everything. Even if I don't show up, I'm really emotional. I'm under the weather, but I'm really happy to be here. I think that what drives my work is boredom because I do things because if not, I cannot stand still. But also, I like connecting with people like you and helping and hopefully share some stuff that it's valuable and then you can tweak it and turn into something else. Now we're all building off each other.
Excellent.
But
Thank you.
let's jump into questions. I don't know if you want to browse
Perfect.
the
Yes, and
chat or
thank
what.
you. And folks, for folks who have questions, go ahead and put them into the chat. Or actually, if you'd like to ask it directly, put your hand up and you can ask the question to Gustavo directly, or put it into the chat and I'll look for them there. And as we're asking the questions, I don't know if Andy, your hand was up because she has a question. Let's just keep our questions to that kind of as I learned from Gustavo, the beauty of one breath questions. One breath questions, Gustavo, which I had never heard of before. And so, Andy, we'll start with you. Why don't you come off? I'm going to ask you to come off mute and your one breath question for Gustavo here.
Sure. In my study of attention activism, the concept is that people don't read anymore. And so my question is, and it relates to what you said before about not being so academic, and thank you for that. How do you get these concepts across to folks who aren't going to take the time to plow through the book or even skip to a particular chapter?
Awesome question. Thank you, Andy.
Awesome question. I think it's a multi kind of approach, multi-pronged approach in which exercises, right? You know me, I like to start with what are the things that people can start doing right away. So sharing things to do that. And it all starts to understand what are the teams suffering from. So if the team's suffering from groupthink, from avoidance, whatever, what can I get started? For me, always is first start to read the signals, notice what's happening. Then invite the team to see the signals, ask them questions. Guys, are you missing this? So if you're the only one who are bringing an issue, then it becomes your issue. If you invite other people and other people say, oh, I'm seeing that as well, then we can start that conversation.
Thanks, Andy, for the question. Okay, is it Michelle? Michelle, I'm not going to pronounce it right. Please help me out here. And I'd love you to come on. And I'm asking you to unmute there so you can come on and ask your question.
Hello, you said it right the second time, Miss Michelle. Hello, everyone. Gustavo, it's so good to see you. I was one of the original folks when he started the Fearless Culture newsletter to be a part of it. So I'm so excited to see this journey. My question is, I am actually exiting from a job. That's why I said I'm leaving the book for the boss in the next couple of weeks, and there's an exit interview. I want to keep a relationship with the particular organization. So I'm wondering if that's where I'm just going to like be okay, which normally I'm not in the questions. What advice could you give me? Should I actually take that brave step and tell them exactly why I'm leaving? Or because I want to keep the relationship, find a way to do it where it's neutral so that I keep that. Your thoughts?
Um, I don't like to give advice without having context. What I can tell you is that exit interviews are tricky, so they shouldn't be the moment in which you unpack and download everything you haven't said. Because if it's about getting off the chest, it's not going to help, and you're going to end that chapter in a bad note, not only for them but yourself. Second, try to be intentional. So, what's the message that you want to bring to that people? And I like the formula. I like, I wish, what if, no? So I like being here because whatever, I wish we could have been more challenging, more rich environment, more promoting of whatever, and what if, and share an idea. So don't focus on the good, don't focus on the bad, but also if you try to build a good relationship just to live in good terms, but you're not being authentic, then they're not going to call you, no? So it's important that people say, oh, wow, she was a good one, and we need to stay in contact with her and working with her later.
I love it. I wish, what if. Another nugget of gold in the book. I haven't got to that page yet. Okay.
It's not in the book, but
it's not in the book, but it's just another wonderful model.
Awesome.
Thank you, Gustavo. Okay. And Ratna, go ahead. I'm going to ask you to unmute right there and come on and share your question.
Oh, I've lost you. Sorry, 1 second. First of all, congratulations, Gustavo. It's so good to be here with everyone on the call. My question, because it's something that I see a lot, will the book help to provide courage to people to speak up? Because courage is a big thing. I see it in the rooms that I'm with people, especially after years of not speaking up or speaking up, tried it before, and they still hold on to what didn't work before. So they're already anticipating what could happen before they even speak up.
The book won't do anything. The book won't change anything, right? Change happens inside. So the other day I posted something on LinkedIn recommending some books. And when I finished with the list and I was writing the post, I realized, why did I select these books? And basically there were two things. There were inspirational, but from an insightful, not just, oh, great, those books that you read and you feel, oh, it's like a TED talk that you live and say, oh my God, I'm so inspired, but then you don't do anything. So I want that kind of a mirror the book for people to look into what could happen, but also to give them practical tools. One of the things I said, courage is not something that we are born with or not, right? It's not a trait. There's some personality studies that shows that some people are more prone to, but I learned myself. I'm a very shy guy. Out of 7 siblings that you have, I'm the number 5 that you need to make your room there, that you need to fight for stuff. So you can develop that courage. And that's what the book help you to give you exercises, tools, and reflections to get started.
I want to add into something that gave me the courage out of reading it. And I think many times we're often trying to sold on the value of having a conversation, but the concept of debt makes the pain of not doing something really clear. And I think that's one of the things that I got out of reading the book is that there's a cost of not taking the action. And sometimes we're present to, yeah, okay, the value of doing it. But what I got present to in the book is the cost of not doing something. And although that may not give you the courage to do it, it's the reminder of what I lose by not doing it. And that's what really stood out to me inside the book. Gustavo, as we get to the end right here, thank you all for the folks with the questions. Thank you for showing up and being here. Any last kind of hopes for what do you hope this book does? What's your dream for this book in the world, Gustavo?
Wow. I don't know. It's an ambitious question. I think what's the role in people's life? I would like to start from the ground up. So I hope that for everyone that has been following my work and applying my work, this gives you like a boost because that's what it's not just an extra. You're going to find tools, the canvases and whatever, but it's more than that. It's a framework that you can play very deep and go really obsessive in all the steps, or you can start picking tools and stuff that will help you kind of play along. I want to share one last thing based on Radna's question, and timely, but I think in the end, we tend to think that we don't have courage. I always tell people you can get fired because of one act of courage, or you can get fired because a lot of little acts of lack of courage. The point is when we don't share what we think, and once again, this is not about getting into a fight, this is not an empower and go for it. That's not the point. The point is our voice stops mattering when we don't believe in it. So that's why when I talk about agency, it's not a marketing thing. It's about, guys, it's your life, it's your voice. So if you don't fight for your ideas, no one else would. If you don't fight for your career, no one will fight for you. That's about it. And I'm not saying which path you should choose. I'm not in the business of telling people how to live their lives. What I'm telling people is be mindful of the consequences. If you're okay with that, then cool. But don't be into my boss doesn't buy my ideas. And I always say, have you filed? Well, I share it in a meeting. Okay, well, I can tell you, I went to a training when I was running an agency in Stanford to learn about design thing. I spent 3 months, whatever, and I wanted to build an innovation shop within, at that point, Leo Burnett, no probably name shaming here. And my boss did everything he could to stop me from running that stuff. And I can tell you the amount of presentations and angles and stuff, I drove the guy crazy. And somebody said, you know what? You're winning by exhaustion. Go do whatever you want. That's me. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not saying it, but I'm saying I'm trying to hopefully to give you some inspiration. And if you believe in something, go for it. If not, maybe you don't believe in it that much.
Thank you, Gustavo. And everybody, can we give it up to Gustavo in the reactions, in the hearts, in the chat right now for showing up today, for a person who's shown up for so many of us along the way on such a momentous day of birthing this book out into the world. And please make sure you get out, you get your copy, you gift a copy to somebody else, and you also put up that review, that LinkedIn post to let other people know so we can help them have the conversations they've been avoiding in a time when so many people do it, so we're not carrying that around. Gustavo, thank you so much for bringing us all together today, for taking the time to write this book and making a difference in so many people's lives.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Thank you, Chris, for the energy and for bringing all the pieces together last minute. And thank you, everyone, for joining and for the support. I'm really honored, excited. And let's hear from you when you guys start applying the principles. Thank you.
Excellent. And check out the chat here. Big congrats. Great job. Congratulations, Gustavo. And make sure you get some rest. Exactly. And that care and that compassion along the way. Folks, have a wonderful rest of your day. Good luck to whatever you're doing. And make sure you get out there and get your copy of the book. Take care, folks. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Chris.
Bye. You're welcome.